Where I can, and where any threat remains, I will not hesitate to prevent this. The powers available to me include banning non-British people from this country and stripping dangerous dual nationals of their British citizenship.
Well, Britain has revoked the citizenship of Shamima Begum. She left the UK to join Daesh when she was just 15 years old. Today, she's a 19-year-old woman who just gave birth in a Syrian refugee camp. Now, Begum says she wants to go home. But the UK argues she is eligible for Bangladeshi citizenship. That's not true, according to Bangladesh. So Begum and her parents plan to appeal, accusing the UK of breaking the law by making her a stateless person. Let's cross to our panel in London now, and I am joined by Ajmal Masroor. He is an imam and a member of the Muslim Council of Britain, as well as Paul Stott, who's a research fellow at the Center on Radicalization and Terrorism at the Henry Jackson Society. That's a British think tank. Thanks both so much for joining us. Paul, let me begin with you. How is this legal? She may be eligible for Bangladeshi citizenship through her mother, but Bangladesh does not have to give her that citizenship. So she is therefore a UK citizen. Can they legally revoke that citizenship?
Well, I think when Shamima Begum decided to go to join Islamic State, she did purchase a one-way ticket, so we're perhaps not too surprised to be in the position that we are. The Home Secretary has a very difficult decision here. I think public opinion is broadly against these fighters and their supporters returning. We've gone towards a policy of revoking the citizenship of dual nationals. It's quite a common process and I think a justifiable one. The question is what legal advice has passed his desk that's allowed him to take the decision that he has. And it's worth stressing the Home Secretary will see a lot more, both in terms of legal briefing and intelligence, than anybody else. So that's how he's reached the decision that he has.
But Paul, let me ask you this. I mean, 15-year-olds decide to do stupid things all the time. That is why civilized countries have separate sets of laws entirely to accommodate stupid juvenile behavior. Now, I know this seems extreme to choose to be a member of a terrorist organization, but she was 15. 15. Is there no sympathy for that?
Well, the age of criminal responsibility in Britain is 10, and we do routinely prosecute people for serious criminal offences at 14, 15, 16, etc., and indeed we have for terrorist offences. I think there would perhaps be some sympathy if there was some sign of regret, but she actually seems to be saying very similar things as a 19-year-old to what she said when she was 15. So therein lies a further problem, I'm afraid.
Okay, Ajmal Masroor, now she's an adult, expressing the same sympathy for Daesh. Do you think there should be leniency on her? She should be allowed to return to the UK?
You said it very clearly that she was groomed. She was 15 when she left this country. She was brainwashed and she went into a very terrible place, a place where no human being or no civilized people should ever live. But she did, and many other young people did too. The problem we have is that we cannot wash our hands off and say it's Bangladesh's problem. She was born in Britain, she went to school in Britain, she was radicalized in Britain, and she left Britain using her sister's passport, using our airport, escaping our own intelligence, our immigration as well as passport authorities, and quite easily slipping into Syria. These are all our failures. Now the Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, has made a huge blunder. He did not do his basic homework. He could have picked up the phone and spoken to Bangladeshi Home Office Minister or Foreign Minister, who of course later on came on the media and made a public statement saying she has never been to Bangladesh, she is not a Bangladeshi citizen, and we will not be giving her or welcoming her in this country. Sajid Javid is stuck now. He doesn't know what to do. He will have to eat his very right-wing humble pie and swallow his ego and accept that this is a blunder he made. And it is not the first time the Home Office has made such blunder. If we are going to be consistent, though, that anyone who goes abroad or anyone who has got dual citizenship, we should strip them of their citizenship, at least the British one, especially if they're adults. Let's start with the wife of Bashar al-Assad. She is a dual citizen. She lives and she supports a tyrant who has destroyed, killed, and obliterated a nation. And yet our Home Secretary, not one, several, have done nothing to strip her of her citizenship. I can give you many examples.
Okay.
I have no sympathy for anyone going to join IS or any such nutty group. I need to, of course, be very clear that they stand against Islam. They are totally responsible for their behavior. But legally, we cannot strip anyone of their citizenship and make them stateless. That is illegal. Sajid Javed has made a blunder, and he will need to retract, and he will need to restore her citizenship. When she's back to the UK, she can be tried for her crimes.
Okay, and Ajmal, I'd like to go back to the first thing you said, actually, that she joined when she was a child. You said she was obviously groomed. We know that she was a victim of manipulation. Let's also bear in mind that her husband in Daesh was almost twice her age. That alone is a crime. That is a rape. She just gave birth to a third child now, and she's still only 19, 2 of which died. She's still a teenager. Do you think there is a lack of understanding for a victim's psychological struggle in the UK?
I'm a trained counsellor. I do lots of marriage and relationship counselling, and I take a great interest and deep interest in people's psychology. When I've seen the interview, and I've been seeing them very closely, it is very clear that this girl is very disturbed. If nothing else, she has been traumatized. Her psychology is not normal. She is not a normal human being. Grooming hasn't helped at all. Going to such a horrible place, seeing death and destruction everywhere, beheading of people and saying, I did not feel anything wrong with it. All these indicate that she, of course, is very disturbed. And most importantly for me, this girl has no knowledge of her faith. She had none whatsoever. The fact that she could not even see that her faith would completely and utterly distance itself from such behavior, she couldn't see. So I can see where she is coming from. I can see she is a disturbed person. She is a person who is psychologically affected. And we as people need to reach out to bring such people to our country because they belong to our country. They are our citizens. We need to put them behind bars. We need to do psychological assessment for them. And most importantly, we need to send out a very clear message. And that is we're consistent. We're not only upholders of law, we're not only propagators of justice, but we also establish justice in every facet of our society.
Okay. Paul Stott, I saw you wanted to respond to something earlier. If you would like to, do go ahead.
Yes, I must admit, as an academic in the field of terrorism studies, the grooming point is in many ways an erroneous one. Indeed, the research that the Henry Jackson Society's just published on the children and families who've tried to go out to Islamic State shows it. What it tends to show is that boys who go out to join IS and similar jihadist groups have tended to do so because of radicalised families. Women and young girls are much more self-seekers. They look for information. These were 3 young women who followed out one of their friends who'd already gone, and they were in contact with her. And also the case that one of the 3 girls, her father was involved in Al-Maharoon, a prescribed terrorist group here in the UK. So there was a radical background in that case. So I think the idea that people have been groomed or lured or that they're in some way vulnerable rather removes agency from them. It's very patronising. We had a 30-year conflict in Northern Ireland, and I can never remember anybody using this language of people being groomed or lured at all. It's a very patronising way that we only really speak about Muslims in this way.
Well,
it needs to stop.
And Paul, I feel as if you...
Let me...
Go ahead, Ajmal.
I would like to challenge Paul on this. Paul, it's Henry Jackson Society you're talking about, an organization that is funded by the neocons, an organization that is established itself as non-credible, an organization that is establishing as well as publishing papers and things like that that are erroneous, including calling me an extremist. I think, look, you can't sit there calling a kettle black when yourself as a pot has been rotten in your research. So we don't take Henry Jackson Society in any shape or form as an authority. Secondly, it is not true that she has not been groomed. Grooming is a major problem in our country. Kids are groomed sexually. Kids are groomed to commit suicide. Kids are groomed to take drugs and become pimps as well as drug dealers. And when it comes to Northern Ireland, give me one example of one Northern Ireland terrorist whose citizenship has been stripped. Paul, look, be genuine about it. You can't even pronounce the name of the group that you've mentioned.
It was routinely the case.
It's Al-Muhajiroon. That's a proscribed group. Get your facts right first, please.
Which one of the girls' fathers was involved in. Can I just say on the Northern Ireland point, for example, that we routinely passed regulations against Northern Ireland terrorists, suspected Northern Ireland terrorists, that banned them from entering England, Scotland or Wales.
Which of the terrorists' citizenship was stripped?
Well, they had either British or Irish citizenship.
Okay, but you know what?
They weren't allowed to enter the mainland UK.
I don't want to get too far off track here, because I think at the core of this issue in particular is that this Shamima Begum is a child. She was a child. That could be considered, as we've heard before, a British problem. She was groomed in Britain. She was led out of Britain while she was being schooled in Britain. So, Paul, let me ask you this. Might it not be good, in a sense, for the UK government and British social services to have her back in the UK under their care in order to work with her and find out what went wrong so that they can prevent this from happening again? I mean, technically, she is what could be the perfect case study. And I want to look at her now. We actually have a brief bite from her where she is asking for sympathy, in a sense. You can say she's showing little or no remorse, but I'll remind you that often victims do defend their abusers after they've been tortured for a certain amount of time. Let's listen to Shamima Begum.
I was hoping that Britain would understand that I made a mistake, like a very big mistake, and it was because I was young and naive and I was newly practicing. I didn't know what Islam was, and I just saw this, big thing on the news, Islamic State, the established Islamic law. I got tricked, and I was just hoping that they'd sympathise with me.
Paul, is it possible that the UK here is being a little bit short-sighted? Who knows? If she is non-remorseful and proves to be for the future, you can put her away where she won't be a danger to society. But if she's reviewed and it's decided, she could become potentially a role model to help prevent this from happening again.
It's fascinating to hear this argument that she should come back, be prosecuted, be de-radicalised, because what we've tended to hear from British Muslim representative organisations and in part from British Muslim communities is usually the exact opposite. Enormous distrust or hostility towards counter-radicalisation programmes, the argument that they're instinctively racist or discriminatory against Muslims, and then over the past few days a sort of full circle turning around that she should come back and enter into those programmes. I would have no problem at all with a policy that prosecuted robustly those who've gone out to Syria, who've gone out to fight for Islamic State, their supporters, their broader entourage. But I'm really questioning whether we have the type of society that would welcome potentially 400 or 500 trials of British Muslims. As soon as that happens, I suspect we'd hear the usual excuses, the types of excuses we've heard in the past around, we've had people saying they went out to Syria, thought they were going to Turkey on holiday. Really quite weedy excuses. And I fear a rerun of that rather than people getting behind a proper investigative process.
Ajmal, let me get your response. Go ahead.
I would like to say that if, of course, Shamima Begum is brought back and she's put behind bars for her crimes, if she's found guilty, I think everybody, Muslims and non-Muslims, all would say yes, it's a good thing, and we are setting great examples so that no one else would do that. The problem with Prevent program isn't the program itself. It's that those people who are delivering, they're the ones who are the troublemakers. They're the ones who are often
Muslim organisations. Countless Muslim organisations are involved in Prevent.
I did not disturb you while I was speaking, sir. While you were speaking, just hold on. I'm saying that there are many people within the Muslim community who would be very, very good at looking at what went wrong with this girl. We could work together in partnership. That's not the issue. The issue is what Home Secretary has just done is unprecedented. I'll tell you why. I, as a young man, I was brought up in Britain. My parents come from Bangladesh. I was born in Bangladesh. If one person like this can be stripped of their citizenship, what would stop any other Home Secretary from stripping people like myself, whimsically almost, by mob rule and by the advice given by people like you from my citizenship? You're making people like us stateless. And you know what? Citizenship is not a gift, is not a privilege that you offer me because you are my master. No, I'm an equal citizen. I belong to this country. If I've done something wrong, just like you or anybody else, we are all entitled to a legal process. If I'm found guilty by due process, put me behind bars. And finally, look, if we are going to make a policy, we will all support the policy. And I've said this before. If any British Muslim would like to go out of this country and leave our country and fight against our own country, please do us a favor. Return your passport and leave. I've said that before, and I stand by it. But this girl was 15 and she was groomed. My point here is, let's make a consistent policy. Let's prosecute Syrian president's wife, Bashar al-Assad's wife, right now. Let's also make a law that will stop anyone from going and joining any foreign army, including Israeli soldiers or British Jewish people who go and join the Israeli soldiers and fight in the occupied territories, often causing harm to the people of Palestine in the occupied land. So if we're going to make a law, we have to be consistent. I'm saying something very simple. Our country is, and most importantly, we need to protect its interest. Anyone who doesn't like our country, we need to stand against them, of course.
Okay.
But a girl who's 15, groomed, a country that was created by our failure and our illegal war, unfortunately, we cannot wash our hands of our responsibility. And what Sajid Javid has done is terrible. He should be apologizing and reinstating her citizenship and returning her here so that she can stand for trial.
And Paul Stott, let me ask you something. I mean, if this is about Britain's security here, having a radical abroad is still a danger to the UK. Would it not be safer to bring them back and put them in a British prison where they can no longer endanger society from anywhere on the planet?
Well, I think the options in these cases are limited, as we saw with the Britons who went out to join the Taliban in the late 1990s and fought in places like Kashmir, Bosnia. Often getting an evidence trail in those circumstances is very difficult. It's potentially easier now because of things like social media. We know there are Britons who pose with weapons, who've posed sometimes with opponents that they've killed in battle. So the potential is there, but I can well see why the Home Secretary's taken the decision that he has. His first job is the security of people here in Britain, and Islamic State fighters can't harm us if they're not in Britain.
Are you sure about that?
I was going to say, I can tell you how they can harm us by making these propaganda and those people who've been brainwashed become a terrible enemy of our country. Did you know, Paul, I live with 2 death threats, one from the ISIS lot and one from the Al-Shabaab lot from Somalia. Both of those groups have issued death threat against people like myself because they can't stand the fact that we know our religion very well. We're authentic. We stand for our religion from the core of our faith, and we are 100% British, very confidently Muslim and very proud to be British. They can't stand people like this. So you need to listen to our narrative. Our narrative is, let's create a home, our Britain, our country, which stands on law and international good stride. And secondly, let's create ethical foreign policies and let's promote democracy and rule of law in all parts of the world, starting off with here.
The Muslim Council of Britain was dropped long ago for doing precisely the opposite of that from cooperation with government. Indeed, it spent a large part of its formation and since lobbying against pretty much every counter-terrorism policy that's emerged. So I'm afraid I don't really buy these warm words. The difficulty also of turning this into a big theological argument is just as you're an articulate advocate for your religion, so are some people in the Islamic State, so are some people in Al-Qaeda. Al-Baghdadi, the founder, the leader of ISIS, the self-declared caliph, his degree, PhD in the Islamic sciences. Abdullah Razam, founder of the most important figure in the founding of Al-Qaeda. Exactly the same background.
Okay. Gentlemen, unfortunately, I'm going to have to interrupt you because we are completely out of time for this segment. Ajmal, my apologies.
Most scholars...
The clock really is against us.
Okay,
I
no problem.
would like to thank the both of you really so much for joining us and sharing your opinions and insights from both sides there. Thanks so much for being on the Newsmakers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.